This is Mommying While Muslim, recorded live and unedited. Watch as Zeba and Uzma record their podcast, see their reactions, and find out for yourself what all the buzz is about.
This episode is sponsored by Guidance Residential. Check out their winter refinance special. Refinance now and receive a $500 credit. Experience the guidance difference today and apply at gr.link/SMO_winterrefi21_22. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to another episode of Momming While Muslim podcast. This is Uzma Jaffrey.
And this is Zeba Hassan. Uzma, we talked a little bit before the recording started. I am super excited to hear about what's been going on in your week or lessons learned. And I'll talk to you a little bit about my mommy fails.
Your mommy feels? That's
Yes.
awesome. I think I want to talk about mental health today.
Yes.
As I've mentioned before on the podcast, we do talk about, and Zabe, I get this from Zeba, this is what you have taught me so far, is that we have to parent every child differently. We may even have to discipline every child differently. So yeah, I do have a child who I think is struggling with mental health issues. And what I found as a parent, and I've taken this for granted as a physician, is it is really hard for parents to get help. If you have especially a child who's, preteen, adolescent, teenager, I have to admit, pretty judgmental about, and I am for kids who go and shoot up schools and then cite mental illness and whatever. A lot of it is because the parents have so little support, even from the pediatrician's office. Let me just tell you, there is not very much help that you can get when it comes to referrals to psychiatrists, to psychologists, and definitely when it comes to inpatient psychiatry. So as, a physician to adults primarily, because I don't want to see kids. They're just too complicated. When adults are acting in certain ways and they're dangerous to themselves or to others, we very easily can institutionalize them or keep them in a hospital. I won't say easily institutionalize, but we can easily hospitalize somebody in a situation like that and hold them for at least 48 hours to make sure that they're safe and that they can be released again and that they're, physically healthy, even though they may not be mentally. At least get them set up with those resources so they can pursue those outpatient. But we don't really have that for kids. And so that's what I'm struggling with this week and trying to find ways to help my kid. I feel like on my own. And that's now like Oxford, Michigan makes sense. Now Columbine makes sense. It just, I'm getting it because I'm on this side of the experience. So it's sadly been my week.
No, I'm really sorry to hear that. And, we've talked about this at length. And one of the things, and one of the reasons why I went into the profession and the field that I'm in was to really help families kind of deal with that. And I'm excited to say that we just hired, literally yesterday, I just hired somebody specifically gearing towards our teenage population who will be helping support that as well, because, and they're closer to her age. She is in her early to mid 20s. And I'm really excited about this because I feel like she is super, super aware of some of those challenges that these kids have to go. And, we can take up an entire podcast about why I think kids are having these issues. And, you and I have talked about this at length. I believe it's that social media FOMO culture that these kids are experiencing. And unfortunately, electronics are kind of given to kids at earlier and earlier ages. But maybe we will maybe we will talk about this at length because it is something that I'm super passionate about as well. And, this kind of leads into my mommy fail, a very similar situation. And the fact that you feel like you do everything that you can. And at least I'm literally trained to see certain things and certain experiences that kids are going through, and I'm still not going to be able to say or do the right things, right? So part of what our journey is as parents is, to your point, parent every child differently, recognize the humbleness to know, as we say in the Sufi world, take away the nafs, like really work on the internal introspection of what we can do for our children, and know that there is support out there, and know that I'm here for you always. So we will talk offline about that. But I do know, and hopefully your soapbox is not going to make me cry or upset today, because I can't deal with any more of that bad news. So Uzma, what is it that we're going to be talking about for our soapbox for today?
We are going to talk about Project Nimbus on our soapbox for today. And so basically what's happened is we have talked in the past on soapboxes about the Blue Wolf technology that Israel is using to create a database of Palestinian civilians, not of Israeli citizens, but of Palestinian civilians in particular, and how atrocious that is as believers in democracy and civil liberty. Like, we should not have a database. I mean, what is this, Gattaca? So a bunch of Project Nimbus, let me give you some background on that, is a contract that was just signed by both Google and Amazon with the Israeli military. And it is a over $1.2 billion contract that Amazon and Google will receive from the Israeli government, and military, in order to basically what it does is provides kind of the Blue Wolf technology, but pushes it all on the cloud. So it won't just be available to Israel. So it's really, really scary that that's happening. I feel like this soapbox is a little bit more empowering because there's something we can do. Amazon and Google employees themselves have stepped up and told their CEOs, at risk of their jobs, obviously, because they could face hostile work environments as a result, but they have risen up and said, no, you can't do that because this technology is not being used to bring people together, which was the whole point of social media and the cloud and all of the stuff. And, you and me here on Riverside, this technology should be used to bring people together, not for apartheid, ethnic cleansing, and the violation of civil liberties, and definitely occupation, right? Let's not talk about that. So this is a form of BDS, basically, that they are working for, these employees, and they have created No Tech for Apartheid. And if you go to notechforapartheid.com, you can easily sign a petition. And I know some people do not believe petitions do anything, but are you comfortable doing nothing? Let's do something. Let's tell the Amazon CEOs and the Google CEOs, Amazon Web Services, that you cannot pursue this contract and you need to cancel it, not pursue Project Nimbus. I would like to do this because Google is a part of our lives. It's on our phones. Amazon, every mom knows, has saved us through the pandemic. I really don't want to boycott Amazon. Please don't make me. So everybody sign this petition and let's put an end to Project Nimbus. That's our soapbox for today.
Yeah, girl, Amazon saves my life on a daily basis. So please, let's get this done.
I don't want to boycott you, Amazon.
I know. But
we've given you thousands of dollars this year.
A month. Okay, let's just be real. It depends on how big your family is. So we're gonna go from the notechforapartheid.com to this week's continued discussion on adoption and fostering, because Muslim American families have so many questions about the process. I mean, so many. We're getting so many DMs and questions that people are writing for us to ask these lovely guests. There are vital interfaith allies in our communities who can help us, including Cultivating Families, whose representatives are here today, Sarah Haider Alam and Amy Becezny, though she did say that her father-in-law pronounces her last name differently, so we're going to ask her officially how that is pronounced. They will be helping us out here today. They're the board members of Cultivating Families. They're equipping communities of faith to care for and foster adopted children, and we are so grateful to have both of them here today. Welcome, Amy and Sarah.
Welcome and salam alaikum.
Hi, thank you.
So we usually, yeah, absolutely. We are excited to kick this podcast off and start shooting a bunch of questions at you guys, and hopefully we won't overwhelm anybody and you won't regret coming on. But we'd like to start by asking our guests a little bit about their momming story, whatever they're comfortable sharing, and their momming philosophy. So Amy, let's start with you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be asked to be in the conversation. I think My mommying story is day in and day out for 18 years. And my son joined our family through adoption. He moved into our home 2 weeks before his second birthday.
Oh,
So, so that was 15 years ago. So we signed up to adopt up to 3 children, expecting to get a sibling group, and we were matched with our son. And we expected to adopt a couple of more children a little bit later because we were open to a bigger family. But as it turned out, we found out very quickly, within a month or so, that we probably got the work of 3 children in one little boy. So he has been a joy beyond joys, and he has been a challenge beyond challenges. But I've loved every minute of everything I've learned and everything that he's taught me.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And, I can say as a mom of 4, like after 1, I was like, I get why people stop at 1. This is really hard. And I meant to stop at 1 too, but I couldn't figure out the whole birth control situation. So yeah, go fig. You don't pay attention in all classes in medical school. Let me just put it that way. So Sarah, why don't you share a little bit about your momming story and your momming philosophy as well for our audience?
Sure. Interestingly enough, I was the type of person who had never, in my younger years, never imagined myself pregnant, but I always knew I would have a family. So when we started the process of wanting to build a family and ran into roadblocks, it was almost, see, I knew this already kind of deal. But we struggled with infertility and then decided that we were going to go the IVF route. That was a very painful experience. We went through 2 cycles of in vitro fertilization, and neither of them worked, obviously. At that point, I was not going to put up with that anymore, and I told my husband at the time that this is it. I mean, if we have failed with 2 cycles, there's no point in trying any further. Let's move to adoption. So we decided to move to adoption, international adoption, and we thought we'll go to Azerbaijan. Well, lo and behold, a week after we made that decision, Azerbaijan's process shut down because of corruption. So then we had by then selected an agency to move forward with, and they guided us to move to Kazakhstan, which was a Muslim country and not Pakistan, and we could still have somewhat of a connection from the Muslim as well as the rest of the world perspective, and adoption would be finalized in the country and all of those details. So 3 weeks into that, we found out that we knew that I wasn't a citizen yet, but because I wasn't a citizen yet, we would have to do the process twice, basically, as if the child was going to come to the US and also go to Pakistan to be adopted. And that double work was something that we were not prepared to deal with. About that time, my ex-husband saw an article on ET Foundation, and he was like, what are we doing going to Kazakhstan? We need to be going here. So we shifted gears again and decided to go to Pakistan and contacted ET. Less than 6 months after we mobilized our adoption journey, we were placed with our daughter, Noor. And because she was meant to come here is why we ran into all of those roadblocks, which I didn't understand at the time. I'm a high achiever, I got everything done right. Why is it happening to me kind of people? And there was a lot of learning and humility for me in this mommying journey. So I think what sums up the mommying journey for me is a quote, actually. My friends and I were on online chat just before I went to Pakistan to adopt my daughter, and one of them said, oh, I'm going to go make tea for my family. When your daughter grows up, she can make tea for you. And I was like, no, I'm not getting my daughter to make tea. I'm getting her to change the world. So then when Noor was 6, she said, Mommy, you keep changing the world to yourself. Just let me be a kid.
At 6, poor thing, bless her.
So I had apparently put so much pressure on her that she had to remind me that she was still a kid, and I
Too
didn't need to
yeah, it
load
was
her up
too
that
much.
much.
And
So
that,
my
but that's
burden
such
of
a blessing that
expectations
one, you
was
created
heavy for
space
her to
for
carry.
her to be able to articulate and tell you, because a lot of kids wouldn't be able to do that. So that is a great mommy moment. So I want you to feel that. And, we always say it's never the journey forward, right? You always look back and see what are the steps that got us here, and that's ultimately where we're supposed to be. So I love that, and I love that Noor, she probably will be changing the world one day, just maybe not as quickly as you want her to, Mama, but she will be doing it nonetheless, inshallah. I'm so excited. But can you guys talk a little bit about cultivating families? What is it about, and how did the two of you meet each other in this journey? Because I already can tell the chemistry between the two of you.
Well, Amy is the founder of Cultivating Families, so I think the story starts with
Okay.
her, and I
Um,
join along the
the
way.
story of cultivating families starts with my son. Um, I was in seminary to be a hospital chaplain at the time that we adopted, and it really changed my trajectory in ministry, I guess. Um, I saw, so I'm an ordained Christian pastor, and that's the beauty of my relationship with Sarah is we can just talk openly about our beliefs and what we hold firmly, and what helps us get up every day and keep going and keep raising our kiddos. Um, I I saw God at work so powerfully through the adoption of our son. Mainly, I guess, the match, the personality of my husband and me and my son, and all of us coming together to create a family was amazing to me. And it wasn't just amazing in a romantic, kind of a way. I realized at that time that we had to do a ton of work to get to that point, a ton. But at the same time that we had to do all of that paperwork, jump through all of those hoops, adjust like Sarah did in all of her different paths towards adoption, flexibility. It was a lot of work. At the same time, we had to let go and let others do their part, and let go and let God do God's part. So it was this kind of this balance of all that we had to do and all that we had to let go of. And out of all that, I recognized that this process, this journey was really hard, and we had the gumption to get ourselves through. But I thought, some others might be good candidates to be parents and to care for these children, but they may not be able to jump through all of those hoops. So I wanted to do something that would make it easier for those coming behind us to just become educated and aware and understand that they're not alone. And that if they want to bring children into their family, into their communities in this way, we can help them along that path. And then it also grew out of my own experience with my family and the support that I needed. I needed to surround myself with others, and I knew that I was at risk of becoming isolated. And so I began on the other end of that, starting to do things like support groups for families so that they can remain successful when the children are in their homes. And then kind of branching out from there, helping communities of faith understand what foster care is, that it's not the children's fault, what life is like for the families, and how much they need to be welcome in their faith community. And out of all of that and the desire for all those things, we just began developing what became a nonprofit to offer programs and activities that do these things. And then it was such a blessing. I don't remember if it was a phone call or if Sarah walked into my office one day, or if it was an It was an email. Um, I set
It was
out
an email.
originally to cast a wider net and to engage more churches. There were only a few churches that were really good at adoption and foster care ministry or education and awareness. And so I originally set out to equip a lot more churches to do that. And that changed very quickly. I met Sarah and we both said, hey, everybody can do this. And so we just cast an even wider net to make the organization interfaith and to help everyone with a heart for children.
Sarah, did you want to speak to that?
How did you guys? It sounds
Yeah,
like you sent
so involved
Amy
in the
an
story, I forgot
email,
the question.
and that's kind of how you guys were introduced. And like they say, the rest is history. But how did
Well,
you guys
yes.
get in contact with each other, and what compelled you to write that email?
Well, well, it's interesting that I was introduced to the Interfaith Ministries of Greater Houston in about March, April of 2014 time frame. Yes. And I went to meet their director of interfaith relations, and she said, "You're working on adoption and foster care?" And I said, "Yes, I wanted to see if there were other faith communities working on this." So, because there was nothing, no infrastructure in the Muslim community in the Houston area at the time, and I was just starting to, go public with my desire to create awareness. Prior to that, I had started the Pakistan adoption group when I adopted my daughter and realized that there was no documented process anywhere. So I started the Pakistan Adoption Yahoo group as I was going through my adoption, and I ended up staying in Pakistan for 8 months. So I learned a lot, and I didn't want it to go to waste. So I kept helping people just privately on my own through that support group. And it was time to take that after 10 years to a larger platform. And that's where I was in wanting to reach out and connect with other people through the interfaith process. So the director of interfaith relations at Interfaith Ministries of Greater Houston said, "Oh, there was a lady here 2 weeks ago talking about very similar things. You guys should talk to each other. Here's her card." And she was done with me, and I was done with her, and I was on to Amy. So I sent her an email after that, say, "Hey, I was referred to you, and would you like to meet? Let's talk." So we ended up meeting for lunch, and we were
Sounds like
both talking
like
at the same
everything.
time because we were
Well,
so
we truly
excited to
believe
find
it
each other.
here. There's no accidents. Everything happens for a reason, and you guys are on board, so we love that.
Yeah.
Sarah, this is more directed towards you, but I'm sure that Amy, you can speak to this as well. But because you saw that nothing existed in the Muslim community, can you talk to us with some details about the misconceptions that Muslims have about adoption and foster care, and why in the past Muslim agencies that have pursued this have failed?
Well, the Muslim agencies that have pursued that have failed is something that I will have to address in much more detail secondarily. But the first piece of this puzzle is that adoption and foster care is still an enigma for the Muslim community. There's a lot of misperceptions about, the fact that actually, the first time I did a public session in October of 2014, I had started my presentation, and this lady in the back stood up and said, "You
Why
are
did she
spreading
come?
misinformation. Islam does not allow adoption."
Just
And
to
she
say
stormed
that.
off. And I was like, "Well, thank you for coming." Exactly. But she had to have her last word, and once she left, I went into details of addressing that question, but unfortunately she wasn't willing to listen. But the first point that comes to my mind, even before anything else, is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born an orphan. Through him and his life, Allah taught us the importance of adoption and foster care. If there was nobody to foster him as a baby, he was born an orphan. His mother passed away when he was 6. His grandfather passed away when he was 8. Can you imagine any other plight for the leader of a community who grew up in a circumstance like this? There isn't one, right? So if we can be Muslim and deny that there is no concept of adoption and foster care in Islam, it's hard for me to believe that we are Muslim when we say that. The issue there is that Islam prohibits against what's called tabanni, the change of parentage. So once you are wanting to take care of an orphan, there's a lot of evidence, both in the Quran and in Hadith, where Muslims are very much encouraged to take care of the orphan, to provide for the orphan, to love an orphan the way you would your own child. However, the nuance that people don't want to process is that you're supposed to keep it in the open. Keep transparency. The child needs to know that they're adopted. The community needs to know that they're adopted, or that uh, you're serving as a guardian rather than a biological parent. So long as the biological myth is not perpetuated, there is no issue with adoption. The Western concept of adoption means that there is a change of parental name. And that's the issue Islam has with the Western concept of adoption, not that Islam prohibits adoption. So that's the first thing. The second argument that comes up is, well, if it is a child that is not born from you, he or she would not be mahram to either you or your partner or your husband. If you're the mom, then the dad would not be mahram to the baby. So in the case of those situations, there are a lot of ways that this issue can be resolved through induced lactation, or if you have a daughter and the husband's sister breastfeeds that daughter, then that mahram relationship can be established. Or if in some cases, I know of a situation where, interestingly enough, this family adopted two girls, and both times her sister-in-law was having her own children, and the same sister breastfed both their girls. So, mashallah, they were mahram to her husband. And if it's a boy, then he's not going to be mahram to the mom. Well, there is the concept of induced lactation. There are ways through herbs and medication that you can induce, the mom can induce lactation and satisfy the mahram requirement. And I think the third one is the inheritance issue, that they say that if you have a child that's adopted, you cannot leave your assets to the child. Well, you can if you put it in your will during your life, but not if you pass away without allocating any of that to the child. So those are resistance points. I don't even want to call them myths.
That's true.
Because
And
they are just
I know you said there's a lot of detail
points.
involved on the failure of Muslim adoption agencies, but if you could just touch on generally why they need support, from other interfaith alliances.
Well, the biggest thing is we don't have a body of knowledge or a group of people who have specialized in this field. So when we started New Star Kafala and were looking for Muslim social workers, that was a harrowing task to find social workers who were of Muslim origin and trained in adoption to facilitate those processes. So we had to lean on people who already had the established systems. And in fact, the only way New Star Kafala could come into being is by essentially taking an existing agency that had that knowledge and infrastructure and then converting that into a Muslim agency.
Right.
Because had we tried to develop it from scratch, it would have failed before
and I
it
think
started.
that interfaith alliance is something that
There was
Ziva
no
and
expertise.
I are really committed to in the work that we do outside of Bombing While Muslim. And, you could consider that a resistance point too in our community where, why should we work with other people? And where I am, there's only one agency that permits safe foster care to refugee minors. And they happen to be religiously affiliated. But they're looking for Muslim families. So it's like it's actually helpful to ally with them, to help them do their work, because their agenda is not to convert all of these refugee minors. Their agenda is to get those Muslim minors with Muslim families. So we have to work together as teams in this foster care and adoption process as a community.
Well, in the Greater Houston area, the only agency that is authorized to place those children is Catholic Charities. And, Muslims are going to go up in arms and say, how come Catholic Charities is taking our kids? No, Catholic Charities is trying to place those kids in Muslim homes. If the Muslim community does not open their homes, where do you expect these children to go, and how dare you then
Yes.
have a problem with them being placed in a non-Muslim home because you refuse to open your door?
Four pointing. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
3, 4.
Every time you point a finger out, you have three pointing back at you.
I forgot about that.
So,
The other is a tongue,
I'm interested in what we're talking about the Interfaith Alliance, and Amy, as an ordained pastor, how I want to be able to phrase this in the appropriate way. So that's the only reason why I'm heading, like, why was it, like, you just heard Sarah say, it's Catholic Charities are not trying to convert Muslim families and all that. We're trying to find, so, like, how do you, and I'm sure you get this a little bit too, like, how do you respond to people that are saying, this is just an extension of missionary work and this is why you're doing this? So, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but I would imagine that is what people are thinking. And I just want to throw it out there just so that you can speak to it with your own voice.
Sure, thank you. And I appreciate the way that you approached the question. For me, that's one of the reasons I started, even when my focus was casting a wider net to get more churches involved. That very point about this being about the children and what the children need, and the community that needs to accept and care for the children, and that very point that we don't do this to proselytize, we do this to care for the children. So there's even a part of Christianity where that was important to me, to cast a wider net there. And that's what was such a natural fit when Sarah came along and we had that conversation, is that's what I was doing anyway. It was just with a smaller group of communities of faith. Let's do this in a bigger way, because all of the books we turn to, if book is probably not the right word, but for the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, all say we need to care for the children. So that's what we need to do. And then, there's a lot of Christian organizations that do this, and they do it well, but they are a little bit more closed. And sometimes if you dig down deep into their mission and vision and reason for existing, some of those organizations are about converting people to Christianity. That's not who we are. That's not what we're about at Cultivating Families. However, it is super important to us that children's spiritual nurturing is as important as their physical, mental, social, and emotional nurturing. We believe that the children need spiritual nurturing to become whole little human beings, and then grown human beings. That's just an important piece of who we are. And so that's why we want to equip multiple communities of faith, so that they're all equipped and ready and able to welcome the children and able to teach them and walk alongside them and help them grow in their faith.
Sorry, my daughter is literally texting me that she thinks she might have bed bugs, apparently. This is what happens. And I'm like, and of course I have it on Do Not Disturb. And then she's like, I think I have bed bugs. I'm like, oh my God, something else that we have to talk about right now. But no, I'm really, really sorry about that. But and hopefully Joe will take this off, because now I'm panicked that there's bed bugs in my house. But we often get a lot of frustrated Muslim families who are like upset. Like, I can't, once you decide, like you said, Sarah, I want to start adopting, I'm putting everything in, I'm doing all of this stuff, and it doesn't necessarily happen. Even if we cross all our T's, dot our I's, it doesn't happen the way that we want it to happen. And for people that are interested, kid and starting to think about like whether they want to do foster care or starting the adoption process, can either of you, but specifically you, Sarah, explain the general process about like getting licensed to either foster or adopt for our audience? Because our hopes is through this month-long series that we're raising awareness and that more people are going to want to be a part of this process.
Sure. So when we talk about adoption or foster care, actually,
Yes.
I've often said adoption is a journey of faith. You have to have the faith, and Joe and Romy will vouch for that, because when the way I met Rumi and Joe was because just before me, they had also made the decision to move from Azerbaijan towards Pakistan with the same agency, and were quitting the same agency, Christian World Adoptions. So interestingly enough, when we decided to go to Pakistan instead of Kazakhstan, I sent out an email to our, other support family listserv and say, hey, we're separating from this agency. We're, continuing the journey to Pakistan, but without the agency. And one lady wrote to me, oh, please don't give up. This is a journey of faith. And I was like, only now am I beginning to absorb that and have faith instead of forcing the outcomes. So by quitting the agency of Christian World Adoptions, I'm not giving up on adoption. I'm just giving up on this path, this trajectory, but I am continuing on my journey the way God is leading me. And He led me to start the Pakistan Adoption Group, and Rumi was my member number 2 with me, because she was also on a similar journey to adopt their son. And it was amazing to have that support and connection where we could meet with other people and who understood our struggles, who could connect with the challenges as well as the joys that the adoption journey brought to us. So in terms of how do you go about the process, try not to do things the way I did. Switch several countries before you realize that this is not the path chosen for you. But some of these things are learned through trial and error. We think we want something, but God, Allah, has a better plan. And we need to come to that plan with humility so that at the end of the day, we can be part of the plan that He has for us instead of insisting on our way of doing things. So the first thing is you have to do, like Amy mentioned, a lot of inner work before taking a step on this journey, because you may think that, hey, I'm this many years old, I've been married this many years, it's time for me to start a family. Well, guess what? That's not working. So just the humility of acknowledging that that's not working and let's take a look at different options is the first step. Then you look at, what are my options if I want to have a child? Foster care. What is foster care? What is adoption? What is the difference? What is domestic foster care? What is international refugee foster care? What is international adoption? What is domestic adoption? All of those pieces, there's a lot of moving parts in each of those processes, but overall the process is fairly similar. So you do need, no matter which path you take, you first need to decide which path you're going to take, whether you want a child from foster care to be a temporary placement in your home, or are you looking for a more permanent placement? And if that is the case, are you willing to foster a child till they are available for adoption? Or do you want children who are already cleared for adoption? That's the second step. The third is, okay, do you want an infant at birth, or do you want an older child? And depending on what it's almost a decision tree that I'm going to have to do for you, and that's something we can refer to in some of the people that have questions. I'll be happy to share that decision tree with them. But through a process of elimination, you determine what kind of path you're taking. And actually, one of the important things that I want to emphasize here is Cultivating Families as an organization has developed an adoption and foster care decision course, which is a 3-week process where we talk about several aspects of this decision. So we initially talk about the inner work, the joys and challenges of adoption and foster care. What does it entail? What do we need to be prepared for emotionally? Then we talk about the physical and logistical pieces of the puzzle where, how much is it going to cost? If I choose this path, what is the expected time frame? Who are the agencies I need to get approval from? All of those details are covered in our second session. And the third session is, you know, we talk about the ways people who care about children, but they come to realize that they cannot bring a child into their home. They still can help in a lot of different ways. So we emphasize that there is something you can do, even if you can't bring a child into your home. And it's important to recognize the full spectrum of the ways you can help a child.
So I
whether
appreciate
with
that.
them being
And
placed in
on
the home
that
or
note,
not.
I would like to ask, what are some of the resources that Cultivating Families offers to adoptive families? And yeah, we'll start there.
First,
I guess
though,
Amy
I
would
want
be the
to
better person to address that.
interject something I thought of while Sarah was talking, and that is people talk about this process and how cumbersome it can be. But I like to remind people to stop and think if you had a child that is your own child and something happened in your life and you were unable to keep that child for whatever reason, how much red tape would you want somebody else to go through to make sure that they are okay and safe for that child? And so when you keep that in mind, that this is a child, it is somebody's child to begin with, and we need to be very, very careful about who takes the child in. So that kind of change your perspective on all of that red tape and that hard process. It's necessary. It's a necessary piece. What Cultivating Families offers, Sarah described the decisions course. I hope that it can become a model that can happen anywhere. Our current course has everything, a big portion of it is a lot of local information. We have information about the local child placing agencies. We have local experts that come and speak. And the important piece of that is we want people to meet real people nearby, because that's the beginning of not becoming isolated in the end. It's the beginning of knowing that there are resources and there are resources nearby. Again, I hope that we can take that model and replicate it in other areas of the country or even other areas of our state. But other than that, when not everyone is called to take these children into their home 24/7. Some are called to do it temporarily in their homes, and that would be foster care. Some are called to do it permanently for the rest of your life. And others are called to come alongside those families that do take the kids in and help in any way, shape, or form that they can help. And Cultivating Families has a lot of resources on all of those ways. One is simply praying. Right now we have a Christian prayer initiative. We have a companion piece to that, which is a Jewish prayer initiative. And we're diligently working on our Muslim version of praying with for the children and for the families. But everything from simply praying to donating items and physical things that are needed to help the children and the families, to things that take a lot more time and energy and passion, which might be being a child advocate, which advocates for the children in court, or even being a mentor or a tutor, or hosting a meal train for the family. The list goes on, and it might be there are things that individuals can do, and there are things that communities of faith can do, right? So communities of faith can open up their space and offer the room and maybe the coffee and water for a support group to take place. And that's where the families can come together and be encouraged by one another. And that is a huge help for these families. Sometimes you could take that even a step further and offer childcare while the support group is happening so that the parents get that time to talk with each other. And then also opening a congregation's doors to teach and help people understand trauma-informed parenting or trauma-informed care, which can also transition to teaching child care workers and volunteers in the faith community. So I could go on and on and on about the millions of ways that you can help a child, whether you bring the child into your home or not.
Yeah, and I believe a lot of those non-foster, non-adoptive roles can be found on Cultivating Families. Okay, great.
Yes.
So, yeah, we'll have that link definitely in our show notes.
Through our
But
website, yes.
Sarah, given your international experience, I would love for you to get our audience, particularly our Muslim audience, who we know, yeah, orphanages abroad are hit or miss, right? They're not always the best places. But can we talk about institutionalized settings for children and how putting them with a family, like putting them in a family environment, is so critical versus relying on these institutional settings to do the job that we're just, quote unquote,
Absolutely.
not strong enough to do.
Well, when a child is born and the first few months and years of their developmental life, they learn how to connect with people through the interaction with their primary caregivers. The mother in a traditional setting is the primary caregiver for a child, and that answers every call and every need of the child in its early, very, very early formative time. So when a child is in an institution, he or she is lying in a crib, and there are 20 other cribs along the same wall, and there's only one caregiver that can attend to the needs of the child. Unfortunately, the children don't get their needs met because it's physically impossible for one person to care for 20 kids at the same time. She's going to have to schedule things. She's going to have to let some of those kids cry. And the hardest part is when you go into an orphanage and it's quiet. There's babies in the room and it's quiet. Nobody's making sound, nobody's crying, nobody's laughing, because the children, unfortunately, even at a very young age, even at a few months old, learn that nobody's coming when they make that call, distress call. And they learn not to waste their breath on it. And they shut down. Their emotional and neurological connection pieces, if synapses, do not develop because there is no connection. Yes, the lady is doing her best job to take care of the physical needs of the children, but there's no eye contact, there's no skin-to-skin contact, there is no babbling and, emotional connection, if you would. So the child's emotional and social emotional development is deeply curtailed in an institutional setting. And as they grow in that setting, they develop a lot of the challenges that later on become diagnoses. I remember when I was going to Pakistan and I talked to a colleague of mine, they had adopted a little boy at 18 months from Romania. And unfortunately, during those 18 months, that child had been so severely neglected that he never could develop into a fully actualized person. I remember having this conversation with Paul, and when I was going to go back for Hannah, and Noor was about 2. I was complaining about how my 2-year-old acts like a teenager, and he said it's worse when your teenager acts like a 2-year-old. And that's how I realized what he was talking about. I thought he was just making a smart comment. But then he said, no, sometimes he is so it is arrested development emotionally. He cannot, even though he has been in a loving family since the age of 18 months, he still could not conduct himself as
I mean, I
normal,
hope,
emotionally
I mean, it's
connected
hitting
human being.
home, because we've all watched those documentaries and those, what was it, like 2020 episodes about those orphanages in Romania. And I forget that autobiography that was written, the
Mm-hmm.
boy, I think it was like from number nine or something. And it is, do you remember that? Was it The Boy Who Never Cried? He's the one who
The Boy Who Never
regressed
Cried.
after he was in a good
I
setting
think
and
that's
then
the
was
title.
rescued by his permanent family later who ended up adopting him. Yeah, yeah,
This happens,
absolutely, absolutely. Because there's so
unfortunately,
many more
this
kids in
happens
those
a lot
settings.
more than we want to acknowledge. I am aware I am aware of a situation where the parents separated and the mother wanted the father to care for the child, and he took and put the baby in an orphanage's cradle and basically abandoned the baby. Said, "You're not getting
Oh,
an ounce of maintenance from me. I'm gonna leave the baby in Edie's Jula." And she went and retrieved that baby
right.
because she couldn't bear the thought of her child
Yeah,
ending up like
that is really
an
painful.
abandoned
And it
baby
just means
in
that
an
more of us
orphanage.
need to step forward and do
That's
something
painful.
about it. We can talk about, oh, these are the changes that we need to make so there's not all of these, abandoned babies. They're not conceived in the first place. But the fact is that I think since, time immemorial, that's not going to stop. So it is taking care of the children that are here right now, regardless of whatever circumstances brought them into being. They are still God's creation, and it's still our responsibility to step
Right.
forward and do something, anything. And so I go ahead. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's not the child's fault. People sometimes say, "Oh, if a child was born out of wedlock, I don't want an illegitimate child in my home." And I was like, "Look, it's nothing to do with the
Right.
child. The child did not ask to be born. You cannot punish the child for the sins of others. If they have done something wrong in making a bad choice
Right.
and also then making a choice to abandon a child, it is still better than killing a child. The child has a chance at life. Somebody else can give her a home, a family, the love that they need to nurture and develop into in a wonderful human being. So it's not to say that we are here to judge. Our job is not to judge. Our
Exactly. And
job
as
is
we
to
heard from Amy even
love
earlier,
and
you can do
nurture those
something
children.
as complex as like, let's get certified and become a foster family, to something as simple as I'm going to go and help babysit at a support group for families that need that support. So, there's a huge gamut of support that we can provide. And like you said, these children did not ask to be born, but they're here, and they are the future. I fundamentally believe the kids are the future, and it's our job as all of us, as this collective community, to help raise all these children. So we really appreciate all the good work that you two are doing, and I know we're going to have all this stuff in our show notes, and hopefully, there'll be more cultivating families in a variety of states. I know we could use one here in the Virginia area. So thank you guys for that good work. And, not that I'm trying to make light of the situation, but in order to light up the situation, we do a segment called a rapid fire, where we're going to add a little bit extra time, I hope, on our time, because we have two people, but Sarah looks like she's going to go and take care of her coughing. Unfortunately, I've been there, having screamed so much this week. But Amy, we're going to start with you, and we're going to put a minute on the clock, and then we'll go to Sarah. So, Amy, we always start off with this question: is what is one of your favorite books, or a book you're currently reading?
Oh, I read a lot of really serious books about children and about self-improvement and all of that stuff, but I do have to say that my favorite lately is just time to relax with a book, and I like an author called Kristen Hanna, and
I love
it's
her.
yeah, it is it's a I forget how you say it, but it's real history, but it's fiction. So,
Yeah.
and I really
Historical
like
fiction,
historical fiction.
right?
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. I really like it because she writes a lot about these historical events and circumstances and moments, but from the woman's perspective.
Yes.
And the women during that time. And I always find it fascinating what life would have been like for the women.
Yes. Well, that's one of the main reasons I love historical fiction. So I am with you 100%. So Sarah, that same question goes to you. What is one of your favorite books or a book that you're currently reading?
Well, the book that I keep going back to is Articulations from Jeff Brown. It's on love and acceptance and healing. One of the things that, before this book crossed my hands, my favorite was The Connected Child by Dr. Karen Purvis, who basically developed the trust-based relational intervention process.
Yes.
And that's one of the most, one of the trauma-based, trauma-informed curricula that I'm familiar with. And I find her approach very, very positive and very, very convincing. I've applied that in my own life, and I know that my children have a better mother because of it.
I love that. And anything we can do for that, it like you said, it kind of breaks down that generational trauma from passing on to the next. If we can take care of ourselves, we're going to prevent that from moving forward. So I love that you're doing that, and I love all of these books. So this is my last question. If you guys close your eyes and you try to transport yourself to your happy place, what does that look like for you, Amy?
Oh, mine is my back porch and my backyard. Definitely.
What a blessing that your happy place is your home. So I love that. So Sarah, what is your happy place?
It depends. But it is
Depends
probably
on the moment.
it is probably at the top of a lighthouse,
Oh, I love lighthouses.
because
Yes,
I believe,
goosebumps.
my vision is to be the lighthouse in this life,
Yes, I
to
love
be
that.
the source of constant guiding light that helps people, to success on the shores. So
I love that.
that's, yes, the funny thing is, yesterday and today, my roof is getting replaced, and of all the days for me to be worried about the noise on the roof, today is the day for the recording.
Of
But
course.
yesterday I had a lot of work to do, and I was so excited that the project is finally getting going. And then I realized there's no way I can think with all the hammering on my head.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to my happy place. My happy place is called Mainly the Woodlands. It is a restaurant that is decorated with Maine decor, and there's lighthouses all over the place. And their
Oh, I love
signature
that.
product is a Maine lobster sandwich.
Oh,
Oh,
sounds
So
good.
that's my happy place, that I can find within reason. I can't travel to Maine every time.
yeah.
Exactly.
I've
Exactly.
actually never been to Maine, I don't
Oh, it's
think. And I have an aunt
gorgeous.
who collects lighthouses, so that really resonates
Yes.
with me. Well, thank you both for
Love it.
sharing your expertise and experiences and information about cultivating families, which I think is probably a model that we should all have, like Zeba
Hmm.
said, in every state. And we wish you the best of luck. And if we can ever be of any assistance in getting those state chapters out or supporting them, we're here for you. We're here for the
Hmm.
kids. And so we would love to hear back from you later or talk to you more about
Hmm.
the organization on future podcasts. So thanks so much for joining us, guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you,
you.
guys.
This episode is sponsored by Guidance Residential. Check out their winter refinance special. Refinance now and receive a $500 credit. Experience the guidance difference today and apply at gr.link/SMO_winterrefi21_22.